I'm Patricia, 34 female. I live in a quiet suburban town in a house that I designed myself, from the open concept living space to the reclaimed wood floors. For the last 5 years, I shared it with my husband, Mark, believing we were building a life together, brick by brick. As an architect, I see the world in blueprints and foundations, and I thought ours was solid, built on trust and mutual respect. I was about to find out that a secret, corrosive rot had been eating away at the very structure of our marriage, hidden behind a facade of love and family loyalty. This is the story of how I discovered that my home, the one I poured my soul and my inheritance into, was secretly signed over to the one person I knew wanted to see me out of it: my mother-in-law. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The house at 124 Maple Drive wasn't just a structure of wood and nails, it was my masterpiece. As an architect, I'd spent my career designing spaces for other people, translating their dreams into floor plans and structural realities. But this house, this was for me, for us. When Mark and I decided to buy our first home, we couldn't find anything that felt right. Everything was a compromise, a box built by someone else. I remember the evening I rolled out a fresh sheet of drafting paper on our tiny apartment dining table. "What if I just design it?" I'd asked Mark, my voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. His face lit up. "Could you really do that, Trish?" he'd asked, his eyes wide with the kind of admiration that made me feel like I could build a skyscraper with my bare hands. And so, it began. For the next year, every spare moment was dedicated to our future home. I sketched layouts on napkins during lunch breaks, rendered 3D models late into the night, and spent weekends visiting lumber yards and fixture showrooms. Mark was my enthusiastic cheerleader. He'd bring me coffee, rub my shoulders when I was hunched over the computer, and listen intently as I explained the importance of southern-facing windows for natural light. He trusted my vision completely, and that trust was the bedrock of our project, and I thought our marriage. The biggest hurdle, of course, was the finances. We had some savings, but building a custom home, even a modest one, was a significant expense. That's where my inheritance came in. My grandmother, a wonderfully practical and shrewd woman, had passed away a few years prior, leaving me a considerable sum in a protected trust fund. Her letter, which came with the legal documents, was clear. "Patricia, this is for your foundation. A home, an education, a business. Something that is yours and yours alone." When I told Mark about the inheritance and my plan to use it for the down payment and a significant portion of the construction costs, he was overwhelmed. "Trish, that's everything," he'd stammered. "Are you sure?" I was. I explained the conditions of the trust, that it was legally protected as my separate, non-marital property. I even suggested we get a formal agreement drawn up, but he waved it away. "We don't need that," he said, pulling me into a hug. "What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. We're a team." In my love-addled state, I let it go. It felt cynical to push for paperwork when he seemed so sincere. The inheritance provided over 60% of the home's total cost. The rest we mortgaged together, a joint loan for a joint future. I saw it as a perfect partnership, my foundational capital, his steady income helping with the mortgage, and our shared life filling the rooms. The day we broke ground was one of the happiest of my life. Mark's mother, Eleanor, came to the ceremony. She smiled, took photos, and told all her friends what a brilliant architect her daughter-in-law was, but I always felt a chill under her praise. Eleanor, a retired bank manager, was a woman who understood numbers and leverage better than anyone I knew. She saw the world as a series of assets and liabilities, and I was never quite sure which column I fell into. Her compliments always felt double-edged. "It's so wonderful that you have this talent, Patricia," she'd say. "Mark is so lucky. He never had the head for this kind of thing. All heart, that one." It was a subtle way of framing me as the cold, calculating mind and her son as the warm, vulnerable heart who needed protecting. She often joked about how the house should stay in the family forever, her gaze lingering a little too long on me. "You have to be careful with investments this big," she'd advise, stirring her tea. Things can get so messy if life doesn't go according to plan. I'd smile and nod, dismissing it as the overprotective nature of a mother. Life in the house was idyllic at first. We hosted barbecues in the backyard, eyed landscape. Dee had friends over for game nights in the living room with the vaulted ceiling I'd designed, and spent quiet Sunday mornings reading in the breakfast nook flooded with that perfect southern light. Mark seemed to love the house as much as I did. He was proud of it, proud of me. He'd bring his colleagues from the marketing firm over and give them the grand tour, puffing his chest out as he said, "Trish designed this all herself." But over the past year, something had shifted. Mark started spending more time at work. The projects became more demanding, the deadlines more pressing. When he was home, he was distant, glued to his phone. Our conversations became logistical about bills and groceries, not dreams and feelings. At the same time, Aliner's visits became more frequent. She'd stop by unannounced, often when Mark was home, and they'd have hushed conversations in the kitchen. If I walked in, they'd fall silent, and Aliner would give me a tight, unreadable smile. "Just discussing some family financial matters, dear," she'd say, waving a dismissive hand. "Nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about." I felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that I was becoming a guest in my own home, the masterpiece that I had poured my heart, soul, and inheritance into. The foundation I had so carefully designed felt like it was beginning to crack. The change in Mark was gradual, like the slow turning of a season. It wasn't one big event, but a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts that, when added up, amounted to a chasm between us. The man who once couldn't wait to hear about my day, who would ask me to explain the intricacies of a building code just because he was fascinated by my work, was now quiet and evasive. Our dinner conversations, once lively and full of shared jokes, dwindled to monosyllabic exchanges. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Fine," he'd reply, his eyes fixed on his phone screen. "Anything interesting happen?" "Not really." It felt like I was talking to a polite, distant stranger, not the man I had married. He started working late at least 2 or 3 nights a week, coming home long after I'd gone to bed. When I'd ask about the big projects he was supposedly working on, his answers were vague and unsatisfying. "It's just a new campaign launch," he'd say. "Lots of moving parts." "You wouldn't find it interesting." His relationship with his mother, Aliner, however, seemed to blossom in inverse proportion to his relationship with me. She was a constant presence, either physically in our home or digitally through a stream of calls and texts to Mark. I'd walk into a room and find them with their heads together, speaking in low tones. As soon as they saw me, the conversation would abruptly stop. Mark would clear his throat and offer a weak, unconvincing smile. "Mom was just giving me some advice on our retirement savings," he might say, or "We were just talking about Aunt Carol's health." It was always something plausible, yet it felt like a lie. The air would be thick with unspoken words, with secrets that didn't include me. Aliner, for her part, had mastered the art of passive aggression. She'd compliment me in ways that felt like insults. "This house is just so, you Patricia," she'd say, running a finger along a countertop. So meticulously planned. Mark could never live in a space that wasn't perfect. He's much too sensitive. She made me sound like a demanding perfectionist and him like a delicate victim of my high standards. One Saturday afternoon, I overheard a snippet of a phone conversation that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I was coming in from the garden, and Mark was in the kitchen, his back to the sliding glass door. His voice was low and tense. "Mom, I don't know," he was saying. "She's going to find out. She handles all the finances, all the paperwork." There was a pause as Aliner presumably spoke on the other end. Then Mark sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "I know you think it's for the best. I know you're just trying to protect me, to protect our family's investment." Our family's investment? My blood ran cold. The vast majority of the investment was my inheritance. I stepped back silently, my heart pounding in my chest, and retreated to the garden. I didn't want him to know I'd heard. I needed to think. What was Aliner trying to protect him from? And what paperwork was he so afraid of me seeing? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was about a surprise gift. A secret stock purchase? But deep down, I knew it was something more sinister. The way he said, "our family's investment," felt like a deliberate exclusion of me. The financial strain also began to show. Mark, who was once so open about our joint finances, became secretive. When I tried to sit down with him to review our monthly budget, he'd become defensive. "I've got it handled, Trish," he'd say irritably. "Don't you trust me?" The question was a punch to the gut because, for the first time, I wasn't sure I did. He made a couple of large withdrawals from our joint savings account, and when I asked about them, he claimed they were for client entertainment that his company would reimburse. The reimbursement never appeared. Then came the incident with the property tax bill. It was usually mailed to our house, and I would pay it online from our joint account. This year, it never arrived. When I mentioned it to Mark, he was strangely casual. "Oh, I think I got that sent to a P.O. box," he said, not looking at me. "It's just easier to manage some of the bills that way. Less clutter, I'll take care of it." Easier? Since when was getting a separate P.O. box for a single bill easier? It made no sense. A cold dread washed over me. He was actively hiding financial documents from me. Eliner's influence was like a poison ivy vine, wrapping itself around Mark, choking the honesty out of him. She saw my inheritance not as a gift that had built our shared life, but as an asset she needed to control. In her mind, her son was a guileless man-child who had married a shrewd woman, and it was her duty to seize power on his behalf. She planted seeds of doubt in his mind, whispering that I would one day hold the house over his head, that my financial contribution made him a lesser partner. I didn't know the specifics then, but I could feel the effects of her manipulation. Mark, who had once celebrated my success and independence, began to resent it. He started making snide remarks. "Must be nice not having to worry about money with your big trust fund," he'd sneer after a bad day at work. He was twisting the very gift that had built our home into a weapon to use against me. The deceit was no longer just in hushed conversations. It was in the very atmosphere of our home. The open, light-filled space I had designed to foster connection and happiness now felt suffocating, filled with shadows and secrets. The man I loved was turning into a puppet, and his mother, Eliner, was pulling all the strings. The discovery happened on a dreary Tuesday in late March. Tax season was looming, and I was in our home office, gathering the necessary paperwork. Our office was a room I was particularly proud of. It had built-in oak shelves, a large window overlooking the garden, and 2 desks facing each other. In the early days, Mark and I would work in here together, a comfortable silence between us. Now, his desk was a mess of old mail and promotional materials from his job, a testament to his growing disinterest. I, on the other hand, kept my side immaculate. I had a large filing cabinet where I meticulously organized everything: household warranties, mortgage statements, investment summaries, and of course, our tax documents from previous years. As I was sorting through the files, I realized I was missing the official property tax statement for the current year. The very one Mark had claimed he'd paid via his new P.O. box. I needed the exact amount for our deductions, and while I could probably find it online on the county portal, I preferred having the physical document. I started with a simple search of his desk, pushing aside piles of junk mail and old magazines. Nothing. I checked the drawers, which were stuffed with old cables, dried-up pens, and random business cards. Still nothing. A flicker of annoyance turned into a knot of suspicion in my stomach. Why would he be so careless with such an important document? Remembering his odd P.O. box excuse, I decided to check his car. Maybe he'd picked it up and forgotten to bring it inside. In the garage, I opened the passenger door of his sedan. The glove compartment was full of fast food napkins and an old insurance card. I was about to give up when my eyes landed on a worn leather briefcase tucked away on the backseat floor, partially hidden under a gym bag. This was the briefcase he took to work every day. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but the unease I'd been feeling for months pushed me forward. My hands trembled slightly as I unlatched it. Inside, beneath a laptop and a stack of marketing reports, was a crisp manila folder. It had no label. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pulled it out and opened it. The first page was, indeed, the property tax statement I had been looking for. A small wave of relief washed over me, but it was immediately followed by a chilling realization. Stamped across the top in red ink were the words "copy" and "paid." He had already paid it, just as he said. but why hide the document? My eyes scanned the page and then I saw it. In the section listing the property owners, there were 3 names, not 2, Patricia Allen, Mark Allen, Eleanor Allen. My breath hitched in my throat. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It had to be a mistake, a typo at the county office. There was no other explanation. Why would his mother's name be on the tax bill for our house? My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I dug deeper into the folder, my desperation growing. Beneath the tax bill was another document, thicker and more official-looking. The title at the top sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Quitclaim deed. I was an architect. I dealt with deeds and property records dozens of times. I knew exactly what this was. It was a legal instrument used to transfer interest in real property. I unfolded the paper. It was a recorded copy from the county clerk's office, dated 6 months prior. It detailed the transfer of ownership for the property at 124 Maple Drive. The grantors were listed as Patricia Allen and Mark Allen. The grantees were listed as Mark Allen and Eleanor Allen. In essence, the document stated that I had willingly signed away my ownership stake, transferring it to my husband and his mother, leaving me with no legal claim to the house. And there, at the bottom of the page, next to Mark's familiar, looping signature, was a forgery of my own. It was a decent attempt, clearly traced, but it lacked the specific pressure and flourish of my real signature. It was a clumsy, blatant lie committed to paper and filed with the government. I sank to the concrete floor of the garage, the cold seeping into my legs, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was a profound, hollow sense of betrayal. The whispers in the hallway, the secret phone calls, the defensiveness about money, it all crashed down on me in one sickening wave of clarity. This was the plan. This was Eleanor's grand scheme to protect her son's investment. She had convinced my husband, the man I loved and trusted, to forge my name on a legal document to steal my home from me. The home I had designed. The home I had paid for with the inheritance my grandmother had left to protect me. I thought about her letter. This is for your foundation, something that is yours and yours alone. I had been so naive. I had let Mark's sweet words about being a team lull me into a false sense of security. He hadn't seen us as a team. He and his mother were the team, and I was just the asset they were leveraging. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the quitclaim deed clutched in my hand, the forged signature staring up at me like a mocking grin. The love and trust I had for my husband evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had made a critical miscalculation. They had mistaken my love for weakness, and they had no idea about the legal firewall my grandmother's trust had placed around my inheritance. They thought they had stolen my foundation, but they had only succeeded in showing me just how rotten theirs was. The architect in me was already starting to design a new blueprint, one for my revenge. The drive to my friend Samantha's office was a blur. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, the forged quitclaim deed sitting on the passenger seat like a venomous snake. My mind was a chaotic storm of rage and heartbreak. Every memory of Mark's affection from the past year now felt tainted, every smile a mask, every I love you a lie. By the time I walked into Sam's law firm, a sleek, modern office downtown, I was running on pure adrenaline. Sam, a real estate lawyer and my closest friend since college, took one look at my pale, tear-streaked face and immediately cleared her schedule. She led me into a conference room, closed the door, and handed me a glass of water. "Trish, what on earth happened?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I couldn't speak. I just slid the quitclaim deed across the polished mahogany table. Sam picked it up, her brow furrowing as she read. I watched her eyes move from the grantor section to the grantee section and then down to the signatures. Her professional composure cracked for a moment, replaced by a look of pure shock. "Patricia, this is your signature?" she asked softly. "It's a forgery," I choked out, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "I found it in Mark's briefcase. He and Eleanor, they transferred the house to themselves. They stole it from me." Sam's expression hardened. The friend disappeared and the lawyer took over. She read the document again, this time with a sharp, analytical eye. "Okay," she said, her voice calm and steady, a lifeline in my sea of panic. "This is bad, Patricia. Forgery on a deed is a felony, but we need to be smart. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. And so I did. I told her about the inheritance, my grandmother's trust, and how I'd used it for the down payment. I told her about Mark waving off the idea of a prenuptial or a separate property agreement. I recounted the hushed conversations, Eleanor's increasing influence, and Mark's secretive behavior. When I finished, Sam was silent for a long moment, tapping a pen against a legal pad. He dismissed a separate property agreement, she mused, a small, grim smile touching her lips. That was his first mistake. His second and much bigger mistake was not understanding the nature of your inheritance. She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf filled with thick legal volumes. When you told me about your grandmother's trust years ago, I remember you mentioning it was an inheritor's trust. Is that correct? I nodded, not sure where she was going. An inheritor's trust is a specific legal tool designed to protect inherited assets from exactly this kind of situation, she explained, pulling down a book. It ensures that the assets remain the separate property of the beneficiary, regardless of marital status. The funds are not considered marital or community property, and they can't be touched by creditors or, in this case, a divorcing spouse. A tiny spark of hope ignited within me. So, the money I used for the down payment is traceable, non-marital, and belongs 100% to you, Sam finished, her smile widening. The legal principle is called tracing. We can trace the funds directly from the trust account to the escrow account for the house purchase. This establishes a clear and undeniable claim that your separate property was used to acquire this asset. His forgery doesn't change the origin of the money. She then explained the concept of commingling, where separate funds can become marital property if they are mixed in a way that makes them indistinguishable. But you were smart, she said. You did a direct wire transfer from the trust to escrow. There was no commingling. It's clean. Legally, you own the percentage of the house that your inheritance paid for, which you said was over 60%. The relief was so immense it almost buckled my knees. So, what does this quitclaim deed actually do? I asked, pointing at the offending document. Legally, it's a fraudulent document that Mark and Eleanor used to cloud the title, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. It complicates things, for sure. They committed a crime, but in the eyes of a family court, once we present the evidence of the trust and the forgery, it will be invalidated. More importantly, it gives us incredible leverage. The lawyer in her was practically buzzing with strategic energy now. They think they hold all the cards. They think they have the house and you have nothing. They don't realize that you hold the trump card, a protected inheritance and a felony charge. She laid out the next steps. First, we needed to get a certified copy of the original deed of sale and the bank statements from my trust, showing the exact amount and date of the transfer. Second, we needed to hire a forensic handwriting expert to officially verify that the signature on the quitclaim deed was a forgery. This will be our smoking gun, she said. What do I do now? I asked, my voice still trembling. I have to go home and see him. I have to pretend everything is normal. Exactly, Sam said, her gaze firm and empowering. You go home, you say nothing. You are the same loving wife you were yesterday. Let them think their plan worked. Let them get comfortable in the house they think they stole. We are going to build our case quietly and meticulously. We will gather every piece of evidence. And when we have it all, you won't just be asking for a divorce, Patricia. You will be taking back your house, your name, and your life. This isn't just a legal battle anymore. This is about justice. I walked out of Sam's office feeling like a different person. The heartbroken victim who had walked in was gone. In her place was an architect, ready to draft the plans for their demolition. I finally understood the true gift my grandmother had given me. It wasn't just the money. It was the protection, the foresight, the legal fortress she had built around me. Mark and Eleanor thought they were taking my house, but they were about to find out they had just walked into a trap that had been set for them years ago. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was Patricia Allen, devoted wife, quietly going about my routine. I made Mark his morning coffee, asked about his day, and sat through strained dinners where the silence was a third guest at the table. On the inside, however, I was a different person entirely. I was a strategist, a detective, and an architect of a plan far more intricate than any building I had ever designed. Every polite smile was a mask, every nod of agreement a carefully placed chess move. It was the most difficult performance of my life, and it was fueled by a cold, simmering rage that I channeled into meticulous preparation. My first move, on Sam's advice, was to secure my finances. I opened a new bank account at a completely different bank, under my name only. I started redirecting my paychecks there. I also began quietly moving small, insignificant amounts of money from our joint savings to my personal account, creating a narrative of minor expenses. A spa day here, a new work outfit there, that wouldn't raise suspicion. It was my escape fund, my war chest. Meanwhile, Sam and I worked in the shad. Ows. She filed the official requests for the bank records, tracing the wire transfer from my grandmother's trust directly to the title company that handled the house closing. The documents came back, clean and irrefutable, a perfect paper trail. The handwriting expert we hired submitted her report shortly after. It was a 9-page, incredibly detailed analysis comparing the forged signature on the quitclaim deed to dozens of samples of my real signature from my driver's license, passport, and old bank checks. Her conclusion was unequivocal. The signature of Patricia Allen on the quitclaim deed is a simulation, a forgery created by someone tracing or attempting a freehand copy. It is, with the highest degree of professional certainty, not a genuine signature. We had our smoking gun. My next step was to gather evidence of their conspiracy. I needed to prove not only that Mark had forged my name, but that he had done so under Aliner's influence. I bought a tiny, voice-activated recorder, the kind journalists use, and started leaving it in strategic places around the house whenever I knew Aliner was coming over. I'd tuck it under a cushion on the living room sofa or behind a planter in the kitchen. Most of the time, I got hours of useless chatter. But then, one Thursday afternoon, I hit the jackpot. I had told them I was going to be at a site visit all afternoon. Instead, I parked my car down the street and waited. Aliner arrived a few minutes later. I gave them an hour before I returned home, feigning a canceled meeting. That evening, after they were both gone and I was alone, I listened to the recording. My hands were shaking as I pressed play. Aliner's voice was sharp and clear. Is she still asking about the property tax? No, I think she bought my excuse, Mark replied, his voice sounding weak and whiny. Good, Aliner snapped. The less she knows, the better. You need to remember, Mark, this is for your own good. That woman has you wrapped around her little finger. With my name on the deed, she can't just throw you out if she gets one of her moods. This secures your future. I know, Mom, but I still feel guilty, he mumbled. It was forgery. It was a necessary precaution. Aliner's voice was like ice. She used her family money to control you, to make you feel small in your own home. All we did was level the playing field. It's our family's house now. You just need to keep her happy and distracted until everything is settled. Hearing those words, hearing the cold, calculating way they spoke about me, solidified every ounce of resolve in my body. The guilt Mark felt was fleeting, a weak protest easily silenced by his mother's venom. They saw me as an obstacle to be managed. The recording was more than just evidence. It was the final nail in the coffin of any lingering affection I had for my husband. The final piece of my plan involved the house itself. It was my creation, and it would be the stage for their downfall. Aliner had always been obsessed with status and appearances. She loved to brag to her friends about her son's beautiful home. I decided to give her exactly what she wanted, the perfect setting to be publicly humiliated. I planned a small, elegant dinner party. I told Mark it was to celebrate a new, lucrative contract my firm had landed. I invited a few of my colleagues, my boss, and crucially, Aliner's 2 closest friends, the biggest gossips in her social circle. I also invited my friend Sam, introducing her to Mark simply as my old college roommate. Mark and Aliner loved the idea. A party was a perfect distraction, and for Aliner, it was a chance to play the grand lady of the manor. The date was set for a Saturday night, 2 weeks away. The trap was laid. All the legal documents were filed. The divorce papers were drawn up, citing fraud and forgery, ready to be served. The audio recording was transcribed and authenticated. I had designed their downfall with the same precision I used to design a load-bearing wall. It was strong, it was calculated, and it was about to bring their entire world crashing down. As I sent out the invitations, a calm I hadn't felt in months settled over me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the architect, and the final phase of construction was about to begin. The night of the dinner party was cool and clear. I had spent the day preparing, not just the food and decorations, but myself. I chose my outfit with care, a simple, elegant sheath dress in a deep navy blue. It was professional, understated, and projected an aura of unshakable confidence I didn't entirely feel but was determined to fake. As guests arrived, I played the part of the gracious hostess perfectly. I greeted everyone with a warm smile, took their coats, and offered them a glass of champagne. Mark was in his element, preening and charming everyone. He introduced my boss to his colleagues, laughing and making jokes, the picture of the proud, supportive husband. Eleanor arrived sent, flanked by her two friends, Beatrice and Carol. She was dressed in a gaudy, oversized silk blouse, looking every bit the self-appointed matriarch. She swept into the living room, air-kissing my cheeks and loudly complimenting the house. "It's just a masterpiece," she declared to her friends, gesturing grandly. Of course, Mark had so much input. He has such a wonderful eye for design. It's in the family. I just smiled, a serene, knowing smile that seemed to unnerve her slightly. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated affair. I seated Eleanor at one end of the table and Mark at the other, placing myself in the middle, directly across from Sam. The conversation was light and cheerful. I let Mark and Eleanor dominate, soaking in the praise for the food, the wine, and of course, the house. Eleanor was holding court, telling a long, boring story about a recent cruise she had taken. I waited for the perfect moment, a lull in the conversation after the main course had been cleared and dessert was being served. I stood up, gently tapping my glass with a spoon. A hush fell over the room. "I'd just like to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady and clear. "It means so much to have our friends and colleagues here to celebrate. As many of you know, this house has been a real labor of love for me." I looked directly at Eleanor. "In fact, Eleanor, you've always said this house should stay in the family, haven't you?" Eleanor beamed, puffing up with pride. "Of course, dear. A beautiful home like this is a family legacy." "I'm so glad you feel that way," I said, my voice turning a shade cooler. "Because I recently discovered that you and Mark took that idea very, very seriously." I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the quitclaim deed. Mark's face went pale. He shot a panicked look at his mother. "6 months ago," I continued, my voice resonating in the dead silent room, "my husband and my mother-in-law decided to secure that family legacy. They did so by forging my name on this document. I unfolded it and held it up for everyone to see, a quitclaim deed that illegally transferred my ownership of this house to them." Gasps rippled around the table. Eleanor's friends, Beatrice and Carol, stared with wide, shocked eyes. My boss looked horrified. Mark looked like he was about to be sick. "What is the meaning of this, Patricia?" Eleanor sputtered, her face turning a blotchy red. "This is a private family matter. How dare you?" "It stopped being a private matter when you committed a felony, Eleanor," I said calmly. I then pulled out the small digital recorder and placed it on the table. "And it stopped being a he said, she said situation when you so kindly confessed your entire plan." I pressed play. Eleanor's sharp, contemptuous voice filled the room. "That woman has you wrapped around her little finger. With my name on the deed, she can't just throw you out. All we did was level the playing field. It's our family's house now." The recording played for a full minute. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was Eleanor's recorded voice condemning herself. When it finished, the silence was deafening. Eleanor looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Mark had his head in his hands, refusing to look at anyone. Beatrice and Carol were staring at Eleanor with a mixture of horror and undisguised glee at the unfolding drama. I turned my attention back to my husband. "Mark," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that stupid?" He couldn't speak. He just shook his head, looking pathetic and small. Just then, there was a sharp knock at the front door. Mark and Eleanor both flinched. "I'll get it," Sam said, standing up calmly. She walked to the door and opened it to reveal a man in a plain suit. "Mark Allen?" the man asked. Mark nodded dumbly. "You've been served." The man handed a thick envelope to a stunned Mark and then another to an equally stunned Alina. "Divorce papers," I explained to the room at large, "along with a civil lawsuit for fraud, forgery, and damages. The local police department will also be receiving a copy of this recording, and the handwriting experts report tomorrow morning." Alina finally found her voice, a strangled shriek. "You can't do this." "I can, and I have," I said, my voice like steel. "You see, you made a critical error. You assumed the money I used to build this house was marital property. It wasn't. It was from a protected inheritance trust, and every penny is traceable. Legally, the majority of this house has always been mine and mine alone. What you did wasn't just immoral, it was pointless." I looked around at the shocked faces of our guests, then at the two people who had tried to ruin me. "I think this party is over," I said softly. "Alina, Mark, I suggest you leave my house now." They stumbled out of their chairs, humiliated and Ken, not daring to meet anyone's eyes. As they scurried out the door, I stood tall in the center of the room, the architect of their ruin, in the masterpiece they had failed to steal. The aftermath of the dinner party was swift and decisive. The story of Alina and Mark's deceptions spread through their social circle like wildfire, eagerly fanned by Beatrice and Carol. Alina, once a respected figure, became a pariah overnight. Friends she had known for decades suddenly stopped answering her calls. She was uninvited from her weekly bridge club and removed from the board of the local charity she so loved to brag about. Her public humiliation was absolute. Mark faced a similar fate at his job. My boss, who had been at the dinner party, was appalled. While he couldn't fire Mark for his personal failings, the story inevitably leaked to Mark's colleagues. The whispers in the office, the loss of respect from his team, and the sheer shame of it all made his position untenable. Within a month, he quietly resigned. The legal battle was, as Sam had predicted, laughably one-sided. Faced with the undeniable evidence of the forgery, the authenticated recording of their confession, and the ironclad documentation from my inheritance trust, their lawyer advised them to settle immediately. They had no defense. The fraudulent quitclaim deed was nullified. To avoid facing criminal charges for forgery, Mark and Alina had to sign a settlement agreement that was utterly devastating for them. Mark was forced to sign over his minority stake in the house to me for the symbolic sum of $1, officially making me the sole owner. He had to waive any and all claims to alimony or any other assets. Furthermore, they had to jointly pay all of my legal fees, which were substantial. The final, most satisfying clause Sam insisted on was a court-enforced restraining order. Neither Mark nor Alina was permitted to contact me or come within 500 feet of my property ever again. Mark moved into Alina's small condo, a cramped space that must have felt like a prison after the open, airy home I had designed. I heard through the grapevine that their relationship, once a conspiratorial alliance, had soured completely. They blamed each other for the disaster. Mark resented her for pushing him into a plan that had destroyed his life, and she saw him as a weak, incompetent son who had failed to execute her vision properly. The poison they had directed at me had now turned inward, corroding their own bond. I, on the other hand, began the slow process of reclaiming my space and my life. The first few weeks were strange. The house felt unnervingly quiet and vast. Every room held a memory of Mark, a ghost of the life I thought we had. For a while, I felt a profound sense of loss, not for the man he had become, but for the man I thought he was. It was a period of grieving for a future that had turned out to be a lie. Slowly, I started to make changes. I packed up all of Mark's belongings, his clothes, his books, his ridiculous collection of sports memorabilia, and left them in boxes on Alina's doorstep, a final, silent act of eviction. I moved my office into what used to be his, creating a single, expansive workspace for myself. I painted the master bedroom a serene shade of green, a color I'd always loved but Mark had vetoed. I sold the dining room table where the confrontation had happened and replaced it with a beautiful, round oak table that was perfect for hosting small, intimate gatherings with true friends like Sam. Each change was a small act of erasure, a layer of new paint over a tainted canvas. I was redrawing my own blueprint, designing a life that was solely my own. The house, once a symbol of our shared dream, transformed into a sanctuary of my independence. It was no longer our house, it was my house. The foundation my grandmother's inheritance had provided was not just financial. It was a foundation of strength and self-worth that I was finally learning to stand on. A year later, I am happier than I have been in a long time. My firm is thriving, and I've taken on projects that challenge and inspire me. My home is filled with laughter, good friends, and peace. I sometimes think about Mark and Alina, and I don't feel anger anymore, just a distant pity. They were so consumed by greed and control that they couldn't see the value of what they already had. They tried to steal a house, but in the end, they only lost themselves. My name is on the deed, singular and strong. Patricia Allen. It's a testament not just to ownership, but to resilience. I learned that the strongest structures are not built on shared finances or grand promises, but on a foundation of truth, respect, and the courage to protect what is rightfully yours. And I, the quiet architect, had finally designed a life where I was safe, secure, and entirely free.